I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. Space is the final frontier of human civilization. To sustain our existence, the human species will have to strive in outer space. And therefore, if we have learned anything from history, the capitalist incentive of private sectors must not be the primary force behind this space exploration. First of all, on to some basic points of setup. Number one, what does the subsidization look like and why do we not support it? This looks like governments using up their national budget, funneling this money into private corporations venturing into space exploration, i.e., NASA giving SpaceX liquid capital for research and development. And number two, this would also mean NASA is contractually obligated to equip SpaceX with tools, resources, and manpower to run their own operation continuously. And B, what often takes place is that NASA gets out of subsidizing SpaceX and Blue Origins extend to technology sharing between these organizations. Second point of setup. We think we are at a critical turning point in which the ISS has become obsolete in less than 10 years. The question is, what do we do about this? The subsidization of these private industries manifests as a trend towards commercialization. That means a corporate actor is likely to take over. And number three, on proposition, what is the counterfactual we support? We would prefer state-led exploration of the space through accountable public agencies like NASA plus the international collaboration, as you've seen with the ISS. B, can contract our projects to private corporations insofar as the state is the one allowing it, in which we co-opt any benefit that op wants to present of private public partnerships, e.g., existing contracts with SpaceX and Boeing to get to the ISS and with SpaceX to build the moon lander. C, funding that currently allocates in status quo to government bodies to divert to these joint ventures. And D, we would strictly monitor these private sectors and allow less leeway than under status quo. On to my first argument. Why does subsidization lead to less control over the space industry? This argument is threefold. First layer, the subsidization leads to less control over time. The nature of space exploration means giving a lot of autonomy to companies inherently. This is because resources are diverted away from developing government space agencies. Government agencies have less power, and this means private space companies know that they have absolute monopoly power and can be increased price, etc. This looks like outcompetes new entries to the market. This is because the subsidies cannot be provided to everyone, so the government is more likely to be able to do this sort of things. And B, SpaceX has secured 60% of the global commercial launch market, and therefore even firms with larger amounts of capital like Amazon's Blue Origin have found it difficult to compete, let alone small startups or challenges. What is the incentives for these private sectors? Number one, profit maximization. Number two, increase shareholder returns so that they can continuously produce and try to go forth in this exploration. This leads to extreme high cost of startup costs, plus high risk nature of projects means only the richest individuals with a lot of money to spare can get involved. This is not accountable to people because the average citizen isn't your average consumer. Ultra wealthy consumers are the ones who are able to afford that incredibly expensive and exquisite service provided by these space companies. 3. What malicious intent do these private companies have? Number one, the incentives to patent and restrict important innovations, for example, GPS and medicine. Number two, focus on space research on projects that benefit the rich rather than the people's interests. This looks like will lease rooms aboard space stations to wealthy tourists, offering millions of dollars rather than researchers, plus investing in recreational space travel rather than infrastructure because perceived more short-term gain behold to shareholders. Number three, environmental degradation. This looks like private actors are more likely to use rockets than use mechanical disintegration, leave behind launch vehicle components unnecessarily. B, this leads to consequences, prevents future launches from taking place. Huge propensity for collision to occur. This is due to Kensler's effect. For example, density of object is low on Earth orbits, leading to huge knockdown effects if a single collision happens. Second argument, why is the government-owned space agencies comparatively more accountable? 4 layers of analysis to this argument. Number one, international, for example, UN regulates and the International Space Station. In a world where governments are responsible for the creation of these things, there is pressure and expectation for governments to unite and create agreements that emphasize peace use of space. For instance, UN led the space regulation programs to ensure that activities in outer space should not conduct for the benefit of all countries and should not involve harmful interference. Creating a global legal framework for this utilization of space resource prevents any potential conflict within countries for these things. Second layer, democratic pressure by the people. This looks like number one, governments are beholden to voters who care about their current needs as opposed to some nebulous future. As such, spending the limited federal budget on space exploration, even if space research is not the most important voting issue, space research takes up billions of dollars of the national budget annually. So people have the incentive to be educated and to be informed of these sort of things. Thirdly, they held more accountable to these things they do in space. They have more transparency on how taxpayers' monies are being used and how are they using forms of technology to pursue this sort of innovation. And lastly, this does not exist for private sector companies who care more about the prioritization, as I've already framed what the incentives for these private sectors are going to be. Third layer, governments can better cater to national security interests. This looks like number one, telecommunications. Monopoly on telecommunications is crucial in the 21st century civilization. Therefore, if someone wants to make it cheaper and faster version of it, it is entirely subject to monopolizing markets, companies, whether they want to allow it or not. Therefore, it will simply disrupt your orbit if you do not comply. Huge amounts of user data are going through this commercialized communication networks, while on our side of the house, we have more stability and security rather than private sectors overrunning these forms of industry, which prioritize profit and may sell confidential data to external non-state actors for the sake of their own incentives. Lastly, they get to focus on resource on innovation. Even on the best case, where governments are eventually going to get to some point, we think it's more productive to use this money to spend time and resources on developing. This looks like number one, space manufacturing of product in zero gravity, highly important use, for example, fiber optic and nanotechnology, semiconductors, and protein crystals that can be used for groundbreaking research in fields like space medicine. Therefore, examples like projects like microgravity's effects on growth of human growth tissue and how to treat chronic conditions like osteoporosis. Governments comparative have obligations to everyone and are accountable to the votes and will have to facilitate resettlement in a equitable manner. This looks like number one. What is the point of getting there if done in a humane manner and individuals living in tyranny and corporations for the foreseeable future? Now, what does side opposition have to do with here? Number one, they have to explain to us and prove to us why is it that these private sectors are unlikely to monopolize and try to take advantage of this market. And number two, why is it in the interest of the people as a whole? In order for them to progress, it is in the interest of these private sectors to take advantage of them. And with that, I'm proud to propose.
Thank you, First Pop, for that fun speech. Can we have the leader of opposition?
I would just like to confirm that you can see me and you can hear me.
You are good.
Okay. So my pronouns are she, her, and my POI preference is verbal. Okay. I would like to start in 3, 2. Good morning to the House at large. I am Praanya Nath, and I am the first speaker for side opposition on the motion. This House regrets the subsidization of the private industry in space exploration. For example, NASA subsidization, SpaceX and Blue Origin. Now, first of all, what does the opposition side understand by this motion? This motion suggests regretting the subsidization of private industry in space exploration. However, we believe that we should not regret it. In fact, this should be celebrated. We believe that this overlooks the significant benefits that have arisen from such partnerships. Now, again, what do we understand in this motion? We believe that the subsidization of private industry in space exploration should not be regretted but celebrated. These partnerships are the very partnerships that have driven down costs and fostered innovation, leading to advancements such as reusable rocket technology. My dear proposition, you need to understand that the government is not investing in things that will ultimately lead to no progress. Private companies have brought in a commercial perspective which diversifies the expansion expansion of the scope of space exploration. Collaboration with the private sector has revitalized public interest and excitement in space exploration. Now, I'd like to move on with my speech by giving a few clarifications to the proposition because they seem to be a bit confused, and alongside also state my arguments. Okay, now first of all, the proposition speaker talked about profit motives. However, you need to understand that private companies driven by profit motives have consistently demonstrated a commitment to scientific advancement in space exploration. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have conducted numerous research missions, contributed to understanding of space, and collaborated with scientific institutions. The proposition stated that the government will give away all the resources for funding this, but you need to understand that the government have framework for such investments. They are not irresponsible citizens. Space exploration is something that the government puts careful thought into. You cannot put a generalized assume for such a claim. Let's take an example to support that side. SpaceX has partnered with NASA and other organizations to deploy scientific payloads and conduct experiments on its missions to the International Space Station. These are the very collaborations that have led to groundbreaking discoveries, advancements in various fields. How can you even stand in front of us and say that these are not means that will help us progress for the better progress as citizens, that will help us progress as as an economy, that will help us progress in innovation, that will help us progress in advancements for a global world. Now, second of all, the speaker also talked about monopolization concerns, but I understand that there are legitimate concerns about the potential for monopolization in the space industry. These risks are not unique to private companies. Government agencies also have the potential to monopolize space activities if left unchecked. However, regulatory frameworks exist to prevent monopolistic practices in various industries. Again, you cannot make a generalized claim without seeing that the government are not irresponsible citizens. They include space, they ensure fair competition and market access for all stakeholders. I'll take that point.
NASA and RSI have
Moving on
innovate in all sorts of forms. Why was it exclusive that innovation will only happen via subsidizing private industries?
Okay, first of all, I'm not saying that innovation will not only happen via private space industries, but they are such a big help in today's world. For example, SpaceX focuses on commercial satellite launches and crewed missions to international space stations. These are the very innovations that have helped us make internet. These are the very innovations that help us make reusable space rockets, saving money. These are the very innovations that have helped us make trips to Mars, that help us expand as a whole. Moving on with my speech. Second of all, I would like to talk about how private companies receiving government subsidies or contracts are subject to contractual obligations and regulatory oversight. This ensures that transparency and accountability in the use of public funds. These contracts typically include reporting requirements, adult provisions, basic standards to ensure that the taxpayer money is used responsibility and accordance with the terms of agreement. Again, I'm repeating, there are frameworks in place that are every day reducing these monopolization concerns. Any deviation from contractual obligations or unethical behavior could result in reputational damage, legal repercussions, and loss of business. This is the very thing that will prevent such monopolization of profit-driven industries. Now, moving on. While public investment in space agencies is crucial, partnering with private companies is something that can enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of space exploration efforts. Private companies bring innovation, they bring agility, they bring cost effectiveness to the table, which is something my second speaker will be elaborating on. complementing the capabilities of government agencies and expanding the scope of space exploration initiatives. For example, NASA's Commercial Crew Program, which contracts private companies like SpaceX and Boeing to transport astronauts to and fro from the International Space Station, has significantly reduced the cost of crewed spaceflight and increased access to low Earth orbit. Similarly, public-private partnerships have enabled the development of innovative technologies such as, again, I'm repeating, reusable rocketry, which has the potential to evolutionize space access and make space exploration more sustainable and affordable in the long term. By leveraging the strengths of both the public and private sectors, governments can maximize the impact of their space exploration investments and accelerate progress towards ambitious scientific and exploration goals. Now, I would like to repeat what my speech has stated and why the benefits actually overshadow the so-called negatives that the opposition has introduced. Number one, I believe that the monopolization and the profit-driven industries point has been rebutted thoroughly by my speech. Number two, I believe I have been talked how the frameworks exist, which in this case will prevent these monopolization and ultimately provide benefits. Number three, I believe I've talked about cost effectiveness and how these are the very technological advancements that make us a better global world. With that, I would like to rest my case, but never my voice. Thank you so much. Proud to oppose.
All right, thank you. First up for the very fine speech, can we have the second speaker of the opposition?
Yep, checking if I'm audible. Yeah, I'm gonna assume I'm audible, so POIs verbally as well as pronouns are she, her. Thank you. Outer space is the common heritage of mankind, and it should be protected from the exploitation of the monopolies that opposition places on a pedestal in the entirety of their case. Panel, I think the crucial thing to realize within the entirety of this debate is the only thing opposition does in this debate is that they throw the benefits out, that they prove that currently in the status quo, that probably some private companies are able to create some innovations, but they never actually prove to us why all of these innovations were crucial towards your everyday individual, insofar as their side of the house diverges away resources from government funding when they take away money in the government budget in order to actually fund private companies such as SpaceX, such as Blue Origin, that never had any democratic pressure and never had any obligations to pay these back to the citizens. We think on multiple levels that this was firstly principally abhorrent, but secondly that this also damned the people on the ground because of the money that they are allocated towards this. Our case coming from first proposition was clear. The number one, that these private companies act as unscrupulous actors from the very get-go, that opposition cannot just hinge on the arbitrary benefits, that they're able to get 5 different innovations if they never actually told us why any of these innovations will actually trickle down, but also tackling their examples then. They cannot substitute examples as analysis. We gave you multiple clear layers of analysis as to why companies are likely going to monopolize over the industry. Why on multiple layers? Why was all of this bad? Why SpaceX currently has a monopoly over these industries then, and therefore other countries can't even entrench themselves in. This were all the harms that they had to tackle on their side of the house. We don't think that counter-asserting examples could substitute for all the reputation that we've already given you coming from first. But a few clarifications here then. Firstly, that NASA can still innovate on our side of the house. So it's unclear as to why all of the harms that first opposition pushes onto us, that maybe NASA is losing out to SpaceX in some form of actual innovation. We think this will not persist in the long run. Why was this true on 2 levels then? Firstly, because on their side of the house, NASA was inherently going to lose out, and that was the actual harm that they had to uptake because you were pushing this to a private industry. When you push this to a private industry, your private industry never had any incentives to care for the poor on the ground because the poor weren't the people with financial economic capital. No, thank you. But secondly, on our side of the house, when NASA isn't going to be subsidizing private industries, this means that their money can actually be used towards their own use in order for their own manpower, in order for their own operations and their own tools. from first, we've already told you how by subsidizing like SpaceX and Blue Origin, you would have to continuously pour in money to SpaceX and Blue Origin. But let's deal with their case then on another level. And being very charitable here, we don't think that SpaceX is necessarily going to die out. We don't think Blue Origin was necessarily going to die out. So this means we can also co-opt any of their benefits thus far, because we think rich investors would always invest in Blue Origin and SpaceX. They won't invest in the government, and therefore it was important. So in actuality, NASA had the resources on our side of the house. They didn't have to pour it into SpaceX and Blue Origin, no thank you, to make them extremely rich, because rich investors on either side of the house were always going to invest in Blue Origin and SpaceX. Rather, NASA can actually cater to a wider range of individuals and fulfill the governmental principal obligation of actually using the taxpayer money towards funding the citizens better and benefiting citizens. Secondly, I just want to clear this up, that partnerships are different from subsidies. Our side can still defend some levels of partnerships with SpaceX and between NASA, but it was not that we were directly giving them money, which was the entirety of the opposition case. They had to only stand on why subsidizing them, throwing money towards them, was the only way to get those innovations that they claim on their side of the house. Before we move on, I'll take any POIs.
POI?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you please explain how you can relate when the motion is clearly talking about the benefits of space program to the citizens? Because I'm sure you are informed that there are other workshops and programs to benefit the citizens. So why do we have to relate the space programs to the citizens' lives?
Two levels of responses. Firstly, this can be symmetrical over both sides of the house. But secondly, your side also wants to benefit citizens on the ground. I'm merely proving how you are not able to do that. If you really want to run on this POI, you also damn your entirety of your own case. But thirdly then, I think it was really, really important for the space industry to also care about their citizens on two reasons then. Firstly, that you're literally using taxpayer money. Your side would also be using taxpayer money, except the taxpayer money would be going to private companies such as SpaceX and Blue Origin. On our side of the house, the money would actually be going back to better innovations. For example, how tons of innovations can be made in terms of telecommunications, which you needed to actually deal with because we've already posited this from first proposition. I just like to note the clear lack of engagement and listening to the entirety of the proposition case then. There's two main issues that I want to solve within this speech after this then. The first is in terms of innovation, which literally takes on the entirety of the opposition case because this was the one sole benefit they pushed throughout the 8 minutes of their whole speech. But the second is in terms of accountability because they never actually told us why private companies were actually going to be responsible on their side of the house, why they had accountability, because clearly in the status quo, private actors do not have that. The first issue then on innovation, why was it specifically important? Because number one, this tackled the entirety of their case. And insofar as their entire case was just shallow examples of how they can get 5 different innovations, I think just deals with all of their benefits thus far. There are 3 harms we posited from first. And I'm sorry that I can't give additional layers of responses here because clearly they never really gave us analysis to actually tackle down from their case. The first was in terms of how we told you innovation was inherently going to be limited by the tons and tons of patents that private companies are likely going to input on all of their innovations. What this process then looks like is they take money from NASA. When they take money from NASA, they are going to patent the innovations they actually create. This means companies that are profit incentivized, by the way, that governments aren't profit incentivized, are going to therefore patent this technology to lock it up. So therefore, the benefits don't actually trickle down to everyone in the world. When everyone in under the government system, every citizen of a nation pays taxpayer money. But therefore, their money is going to be subsidized towards a rich company. And the rich company knows that these people will never buy their products anyway. And therefore, all of the innovation taking opposition at best would never actually come down to these citizens because they never actually had the financial capital to buy back from these profit incentivized companies. But secondly, on their side of the house, the innovations therefore as a result will only focus on the rich individuals and therefore never be on the poor people on their side of the house. But the thirdly then is just in terms of monopolies because insofar as NASA and as they themselves have conceded to that there is limited taxpayer money there, that means that NASA is going to have limited resources. They're pouring that into a rich company owned by a rich CEO, and therefore also getting rich investors to invest in them. All of these things just compound as a monopoly on their side of the house. The second issue then, and quickly then as towards how they never responded to our second argument on accountability, The importance of this argument and this clash is extremely clear because on our side of the house, accountability could actually be placed on the companies themselves. On opposition, you never had accountability on these large companies because their only market was the rich people, and rich people never had an incentive to therefore take down the people that they were benefiting off of. The first is in terms of democratic pressure, how you get better democratic pressure for these large governments as a result, because you had individuals had political capital. But secondly, likely large companies are going to data leak from the very first place. So at the end of this issue, we've already told you how our comparative is much more accountable, but their sides, they just told you that you could get a numerous list of benefits, but never actually told you how it could trickle down to your most vulnerable on the ground. So it's clear why we win on the main stakeholder in this debate.
All right, thank you, DPM, for that very fine speech. Can we move on to the DLO?
Yes, just a second. I'll put up my timer. I hope I'm visible and audible.
You're good.
I'd start with the backward count of 3, 2, 1. Space is not about reaching for the stars. It's about igniting the fire within us to push the boundaries of what's possible. Good morning to the House at large. I, Paridhee Aggarwal, as the second speaker of opposition, stand firmly against the motion at hand today. I, as the second speaker, would be expanding on our previous arguments and introducing fresh perspectives about cost efficiency, innovation, competition, and economic growth to convince this House why the opposition stands correctly. Now, before I start with my speech, I would like to address a few points that are worthy of immediate discussion mentioned by the prop. Essentially, the first speaker stated that there is more stability in NASA rather than private sectors. But dear opponent, private space companies may face market fluctuations, but they thrive on innovation and adaptability. Government agencies like NASA, while stable, can bureaucracy and political shifts, while public-private partnerships offer a balance, combining stability with entrepreneurial drive to advanced space exploration effectively. Now, moving on to my constructives. Now, as we stand on the brink of a new era in space exploration, it is clear that the old models of government-led initiatives alone are no longer sufficient to propel us forward. The emergence of private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin has injected a surge of innovation, efficiency, and entrepreneurship into the space industry. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others are not only launching satellites and cargo missions, but are also setting their sights on missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Central to this shift is the concept of subsidizing private industry in space exploration, where governments provide financial support to these companies to fuel their ambitious endeavors. By subsidizing these private entities, governments have the opportunity to leverage their agility, creativity, and cost effectiveness to achieve ambitious space exploration goals that were once thought impossible. Decline. The partnership between public and private sectors represents a bold and promising approach to advancing humanity's presence in space, driving scientific discovery, fostering economic growth, and inspiring future generations to reach for the stars. So now, when we talk about cost efficiency, it's important to know that private companies often operate with greater efficiency and cost effectiveness compared to government-run space programs. They are driven by market competition and profit motives, which incentivizes them to streamline operations, optimizes processes, and minimizes expenses. Think of it like this: private companies are like the super efficient startups of the space world. They've got that nimble, get things done attitude that often means that they can explore a space. By giving them a financial boost, governments can get more information in space exploration. By subsidizing private companies, governments can harness these efficiencies to achieve space exploration goals at a lower cost. And this is particularly beneficial when budgets are constrained or when there is pressure to maximize the return on investment in space exploration. These subsidies serve as a powerful incentives for private companies to invest in research, development, and innovation in space exploration technologies. Not right now. The competitive nature of the space industry drives companies to continuously push the boundaries of technological capabilities, leading to breakthroughs in areas such as propulsion systems, material sciences, robotics, and life support systems. Imagine a playground where companies are like racing to come up to the best and most futuristic space tech. These subsidies are like the prizes that spur upon them, and while they're constantly trying to outdo each other. And when governments are able to provide them with these subsidies, it's like giving extra motivation to them to dream up even more amazing space tech. Like from building rocket boosters to space habitats, these companies are always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. As I mentioned before, subsidization stimulates healthy competition among private companies vying for government contracts and funding in the space sector. Competition incentivizes companies to innovate, improve efficiency, and reduce cost to gain a competitive edge. This benefits taxpayers and consumers by maximizing the value obtained from public investment in space exploration. For instance, everyone is trying to reach the moon, but instead of countries, it's private companies competing. And when private space companies know that there's a prize waiting for them at the finish line in the form of government contracts and funding, they'll kick into high gear. They're constantly trying to outdo each other, which means they're always looking for ways to make their mission cheaper, safer, and more exciting. Furthermore, subsidizing private space companies incentivize innovation and drives technological advancements at a rapid pace. Unlike government agencies, private companies operate under market pressures that necessitate efficiency and continuous improvement. By providing financial support and incentives for research and development, governments can catalyze breakthroughs in space technology that benefit not only the space industry but also other various sectors of the economy. Take SpaceX, for example. They figured out how to reuse rockets, which is like recycling in space. And they're not just stopping there, they're dividing into all kinds of sci-fi tech like AI and robots to make space travel. By subsidizing private industry in space exploration, governments can leverage the innovative capabilities of the private sector to accelerate progress towards achieving key objectives in space exploration, such as lunar exploration, colonization, and beyond. Subsidizing of private industry in space exploration stimulates economic growth by catalyzing investment, innovation, and job creation across various sectors of the economy. This space industry creates demand for skilled labor in fields such as aerospace engineering, manufacturing, software development, data analysis, and logistics, leading to the creation of high quality jobs with competitive wages. Space isn't just about exploring the final frontier, it's also about creating jobs and boosting the economy. By supporting these private space ventures, governments are investing in a whole new industry that's ripe with opportunities, from engineers to scientists to tour guides for space tourists. There is a whole galaxy of jobs waiting to be filled, and that means more money flowing into the local economies and more opportunities for people to chase their dreams. Subsidizing private industry allows governments to share their financial risks associated with space exploration with those private companies. So private companies are often willing to invest their own capital alongside government subsidies, spreading the financial burden and reducing the overall risk to taxpayers. Because let's face it, space exploration is a risky business. And when governments team up with private companies, they're spreading out that risk like a big cosmic insurance policy. It's like going on a road trip with friends. If something goes wrong, you've got backup. By sharing the risk, governments can explore new frontiers without putting all their eggs in one basket, while private companies get the support they need to aim for the stars. In conclusion, I would like to say that backing private space ventures is like igniting a rocket of possibilities. It fuels innovation, lights up competition, and opens up the cosmos to everyone. Plus, it's not just about exploring the stars, it's about creating jobs, growing economies, and sharing the adventure. With this, I would like to rest my case, but never my voice. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Diallo, for that very fine speech. Can we move on to the third speech of the proposition?
Hi, am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I have two crucial issues that is in this debate. But before going on, let's bring back our counterfactual that has never been engaged with. We want to pour all of it into government space agency. We say that even if in the worst case, where there's no public-private partnerships, we think that government is more accountable on our. Comparatively on their side, government space agencies continuously get weaker because resources are all going towards private companies. That is why the existence of government agencies can be counterbalanced in our. So it's only in our side that gets competition. On their side, you can only subsidize the biggest and most powerful space companies like SpaceX, and you ignore smaller private companies and you ignore government agencies them. But also, let's talk about two crucial observations that I gotten in this debate. Firstly, I genuinely don't understand why any of their benefits are mutually exclusive to the impact that we are pushing. Sure, you can subsidize companies, but understand that subsidizing are different from partnership. Even though we have space research right now, it doesn't mean it can't be better. Okay, is that the status quo could be much more better. It's just that the investment now we have is just bad because we are not pouring public funds into it. The point in which they call our entire benefit is the point when they lose the debate. And secondly, this debate is not just about who can make better space exploration, right? But instead, it should be on like public fundings. This motion is about the obligations of the government and how they use taxpayers' money. If opposition is right and that private companies are so good, then we think private investors will invest to them on either side. They have yet to prove their burden of why government funding should go into private space companies that have historically exploited people. They have already lost the debate in the get-go. But let's go on to our first issue, which is about public fundings. In Alicia's speech, they tried to POI and talk and say that why do people need to care, like why government needs to care about the people on the ground. This is largely untrue. The reason why we should care about benefiting citizens is one, research is not just good in abstract, it's only good if it brings us utilitarian outcomes. And secondly, it's literally their taxpayers' money. Billions of dollars are poured into it per year. It's the obligation of governments to use that taxpayers' money into something that actually benefits the taxpayers then. And secondly, let's go into which provides better checks and balances. They try to say that, oh, we also can get accountability because they still want profit, right? Let's take down this point. Understand that profit doesn't work because they make money from rich people only who don't care about negative externalities that are done in space, such as things like space pollution then. B, their image being harmed doesn't mean anything because they are already so powerful and dependent on the people on the ground. E.g., like this kind of SpaceX blew up rockets, but we can't do anything because they are too powerful, and eventually we cannot say anything about it, or else they won't give us the resources that at least on our side we get better accountability then. Diallo also says that spreading the risk onto like private companies is better. This is symmetric. On their side, they are putting all their eggs into one basket by relying only on the goodwill of private companies. But those companies, as we told you, profit driven and will take on risks that come at the expense of regular people. If it risks on either side, right, we prefer that government takes the risk then. This is because governments can cross-subsidize for other tax revenue streams, and because of all the reasons we told you, government are more accountable. We tell you that democratic pressures are going to be came from people towards the government. So any government that is irresponsible will be voted out of power. So there is an incentive to be responsible for your own like space projects. And secondly, about transparency, when they have to declare the budget towards their own people, this leads to more discourse. On their side, private space companies keep their projects hidden because they don't want to disclose private into their competitors then. And also, let's talk about why do companies wants to take over space is because firstly, there's going to be a monetary incentive. It's far easier to cater to rich consumer because that is what gets you the most profit. So they invest into useless projects such as space hotels and luxury space travel instead of technologies that actually benefit the people on the ground. And secondly, we want to exploit resource in space. When governments invest in private companies to do things like extracting rare earth elements from another planet and also resource that could cater for Earth's growing demands, indirectly, we are giving them the power to access these resources. It gives companies immense wealth and power. If you want to get resources, you need to get through the private company. It puts a large dependency on the companies then. If the companies decide to go against countries, it is game over them. the abuse of companies and why is it true and why is it super harmful then is firstly the inherent reason why companies actually take over, because there is not a lot of regulation that are placed onto them who can provide the exploitation of people in space. In grounds, right, we can see that people on the ground getting protected by laws, but when it comes to space, right, when companies actually buy them over, is their entire property then. And secondly, so if you give companies power over space, Earth resources are going to be limited. There are going to be rarer resources in space. The logical thing is that we can get the resources in order to make the quality of life for human better. But when you give it to companies, then monopolization might happen. The entire Earth falls in the hands of companies taking over space in the long run when Earth actually dies. This is even worse when companies don't meet any form of backlash, because the entire country is then dependent on the company. It's more likely that it leads to monopolization. The gap between the rich and the poor widens even larger than ever. Even if you don't accept any of these analysis, why is government significantly better than companies taking over is because firstly about the regulations in place. Because state-owned companies also plays an important role in regulating space activities, including those carried out by private companies. By having control, they can enforce rule standards and also be able to push more ethical guidelines, right? Preventing the unchecked exploitation and ensuring that maybe like this kind of private companies have responsible practices. We say that we have this thing called the international space law that's already stated by my first speaker. It's more likely that the state-owned companies are more likely to follow this kind of international space law than private companies would, because this law emphasizes the peaceful use of space, where activities in outer space should be conducted for the benefit of all countries and should not involve harmful interference like space pollution. Then adhering to this kind of principle, preventing any potential conflict with countries. And secondly, let's talk about transparency and accountability when actually state-owned country runs it, because in space, right, public agencies can then provide a level of scrutiny that commercial entities such as the private companies may not apply to themselves, reducing the potential for unethical actions and harmful consequences then, which leads to us being able to get better checks and balances. Let's go to our wings. In both worlds, there's space exploration. In both worlds, we can find resources. They say they win out because they are able to get more efficiency on their side. We say we win because we have better checks and balances on Gov side. We have already proved that state-owned companies have more incentive to benefit people on the ground is weighed out by our side, so they can't run away from the fact that even if you are able to provide resources as well, but you risk companies doing monopolization that kills competition, which they push for, and in the end leading to companies selling higher and higher prices on resources. People on the ground in ops worlds die. Even if it doesn't happen, we say that government could do the same. At least we have a guaranteed benefit towards the people on the ground, as we are actually giving it towards them, because we have the backlash that is going to happen towards us, where we don't see things like state-owned companies going to blast up like this kind of space exploration, where we are able to see actually accountability being pushed towards them, so they have to do something about it. When they actually find resources in the space exploration, they have to give it to the people on the ground, which already shows why we win them in every circumstances of this debate. We have already won them.
All right, thank you very much, Gov Whip. Can we have the opposition whip?
All right, second. Okay, so I'll be starting my speech on the reverse countdown of 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges and respected opponents, I am Aarohi Gupta, the third and final speaker of my team today. I rise to passionately oppose the motion that this House regrets the subsidization of private industry in space exploration. And we in the opposition couldn't disagree more with such a motion. Contrary to the assertions put forth by the proposition, we firmly believe that supporting private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin is not just beneficial, but indeed imperative for the advancements of humanity's presence beyond Earth. Let me start straight with my rebuttals for the proposition team's weak arguments. Firstly, let's talk about the risk of private interests overriding scientific explorations. The rebuttal for the proposition team is that they may express concerns that subsidizing private companies could lead to prioritization of profit motives over scientific objectives, potentially compromising the integrity of space exploration. However, it is essential to recognize that government agencies like NASA maintain strict oversight and control over missions and projects involving private partners. These partnerships are typically governed by contractual agreements that prioritize scientific goals and ensure adherence to established protocols. Additionally, private companies understand that their reputation and future success in the space industry depends on their ability to contribute meaningfully to scientific research and exploration. As such, they are incentivized to align their interests with the broader objectives of space exploration rather than prioritizing short-term financial gains. Secondly, let's look at concerns about environmental impacts. The proposition raised valid concerns about the environmental impact of space exploration, particularly regarding the disposal of rocket stages and other space debris. While this is indeed a significant issue, it is important to note that while private companies like SpaceX have made significant strides in addressing environmental concerns through the development of reusable rocket technology, by enabling the recovery and reuse of rocket components, reusable launch systems reduce the need for new manufacturing products and declined and minimize waste generation. Additionally, private companies are actively researching and developing innovative solutions for mitigating space debris, such as deorbiting systems and active debris removal technologies. Moreover, government oversight and regulatory frameworks can ensure that private companies adhere to strict environmental standards and take proactive measures to minimize their impact on the environment. Thirdly, let me talk about cost to taxpayers. The proposition may express concerns about the cost of subsidizing private space companies, arguing that taxpayer funds could be better allocated to other pressing priorities. However, it is important to consider the long-term economic benefits of space exploration, which extend far beyond the immediate cost of investment. Space exploration drives technological innovation, decline, fosters economic growth, and creates high-skilled job opportunities across various sectors of the economy. I'd like to take that POI now.
Why
Moving
were
on.
everyday individuals on your side of the house able to actually benefit from, for example, rocket boots from SpaceX on your side?
Right, so I'll be stating further about that in my speech. If you still have a doubt, you can approach me later in my speech. Continuing on, moreover, the development of new space technologies and capabilities often leads to spin-off benefits for society, ranging from advancements in telecommunications and satellite imaging to medical research and environmental monitoring. Additionally, public-private partnerships allow for the sharing of costs and risks between the government and industry partners, helping to maximize the value of taxpayer dollars while incentivizing private investment in space exploration. And lastly, lack of transparency. The rebuttal is that proposition may raise concerns about the lack of transparency in private space companies' operations, particularly regarding safety, regulatory compliance, and data sharing. However, it is important to recognize that private companies operating in the space sector are subject to rigorous oversight and regulatory requirements imposed by government agencies like the Federal Aviation Administration, which stands for FAA, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA. These regulatory frameworks mandate strict safety standards, environmental protections, and data reporting requirements to ensure the integrity and safety of space activities. Additionally, public-private partnerships, like I stated before, often involve contractual agreements that specify transparency and data sharing provisions, enabling government agencies to monitor and evaluate the performance of private partners effectively. By establishing clear guidelines and accountability mechanisms, public-private partnerships can enhance transparency and promote trust between government and industry stakeholders in the commercial space sector. If there are still any lingering doubts about our side of the motion and our case, let me make it very clear to you proposition with an example. The subsidization of private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin in space exploration stands as a cornerstone of humanity's journey beyond Earth's boundaries. These companies, spearheaded by visionary leaders such as Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, have reshaped our understanding of space travel and expanded the horizons of possibility and our capability of exploring space. SpaceX's groundbreaking achievements, from the development of reusable rocket technology to the ambitious plans for interplanetary colonization with the Starship spacecraft, have propelled us into a new era of space exploration. Similarly, Blue Origin's advancements in reusable launch vehicles and lunar landers have demonstrated the potential for innovation and cost efficiency in space exploration. Furthermore, the partnership between private entities and government space agencies exemplified collaboration declined, with SpaceX through initiatives like the Commercial Crew Program have proven to be mutually beneficial. By combining the resources and expertise of both sectors, we have achieved feats that would have been far unimaginable just a few decades ago. For instance, the Commercial Crew Program has enabled SpaceX to develop crewed spacecraft capable of transporting astronauts to and from the international space stations, reducing reliance on costly Russian Soyuz spacecraft and fostering healthy competition within the commercial space industry. Moreover, the infusion of public funds into private space companies decline has catalyzed economic growth and job creation, stimulating innovation and investment in related sectors. The burgeoning space industry has created demand for skilled professionals in engineering, manufacturing, and scientific research, driving economic development and prosperity. Additionally, the commercialization of space has opened up revenue streams through activities such as satellite deployment, space tourism, resource attraction, and offering new opportunities for economic growth and prosperity on both local and global scales. In conclusion, the subsidization of private industry in space exploration is not merely commendable, but indeed commendable. Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are at the forefront of innovation, driving economic growth and expanding humanity's reach into the cosmos. By leveraging the strengths of both the public and private sectors, we can realize that humanity's ambitions for exploring and inhabiting space, ensuring a brighter and more prosperous future for generations to come. Dear opponent, you may bring forth your opinion, but you cannot change the facts. And space exploration is something that we should not regret, but to embrace and enjoy in this world of today. On that note, this is Aarohi Gupta signing off. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Opwi, for that fine speech, and that concludes the substantive part of this debate. Can we have the opposition reply speaker?
Yeah. Just making sure you can hear me and see me.
Oh, good.
Okay. So I would like to start in 3, 2, 1. Good morning to the House at large yet again. I'm Praanya Nath, and I am back for the reply speech of this debate. Now, today I would like to discuss what the clashes that arose from the state. Now, I'll be talking about 2 things: what the proposition said, what the opposition said, and why ultimately we take the stand in each and every clash. Number 1. Now, the first clash, we talked about scientific advancement. Now, the proposition argues that the profit-driven interests of private companies will hinder scientific advancement in space exploration. Now, what we say is that we provide examples of how private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have actively contributed to scientific research and exploration. We've stated how they've cited collaborations with scientific institutions and missions that have led to groundbreaking discoveries. We've also highlighted how profit motives can incentivize innovation and technological progress. Now, why do we win this clash? The opposition has effectively demonstrated that profit-driven interests have not hindered scientific advancement, but they've rather incentivized innovation and contributed to our understanding of the cosmos, which refutes the proposition's claim. Now, what was the second clash? The second clash was of the monopolization concerns of the proposition. The proposition raises concerns about the potential for monopolization of the space industry by wealthy corporations, which poses risk to fair competition and market access. Now, what do we respond to this? We acknowledge the concerns, but we also argue that regulatory frameworks are existing and are made again and again to prevent monopolistic practices in various industries. And you can see it in the world. These are actually reducing these very monopolistic practices. We've also pointed out the diversity of offerings and competition within the private sector itself, which mitigates the risk of monopolization. So why do we ultimately win this clash? So the opposition effectively addresses the concerns about monopolization by highlighting existing regulatory frameworks and the diversity of offerings within the private sector. Now, what was the third clash present in today's world? It was the accountability raised by the proposition, and this was actually one of their main points. So what does the proposition do? The proposition expresses concerns about the lack of transparency and accountability in private companies receiving government subsidies or contracts. Now, how do we respond to this? We counter this by pointing out that private companies are subject to contractual obligations and regulatory oversight. We ensure the transparency and accountability in the use of public funds. We also highlight the reputational risks and legal repercussions for unethical behavior, and I think it's clear that we actually take this clash. Now, there are 2 more clashes that I would just like to cover quickly, which was public investment and innovation and competition. So the proposition adds to prioritizing investment in allocation of public funds and the role of projects can actually enhance efficiency and effectiveness of space exploration efforts. Which what does this do eventually? This leverages innovation, agility, and cost effectiveness of private companies. And then the last and final flash I would like to present to the House at large is the impact on socioeconomic equity. This is the point that the proposition really asserts. They assert that the subsidization of private industry in space exploration exacerbates socioeconomic inequalities, with the benefits primarily occurring to wealthy corporations and individuals while neglecting the needs of poor and marginalized communities. I quote this straight from the proposition speech. And what do? We counter this by highlighting how public-private partnerships in space exploration can have positive socio-economic impacts, such as job creation, economic growth, and technological innovation, which benefit a wide range of stakeholders, including disadvantaged communities. We also point out initiatives like space tourism and satellite deployment services have the potential to generate revenue and create employment or traditionally have been undeserved or unmarked. The opposition effectively rebuts the proposition's argument by demonstrating that public-private partnerships in space exploration have tangible socioeconomic benefits that extend beyond wealthy corporations and individuals. With that, I would like to say that I firmly believe that opposition should take the case in today's debate. With that, I'd like to rest my case.
All right, thank you very much for reply. Can we have the final speaker of the debate?
Checking if I'm audible.
You're good.
Thank you. The fluffy words of the opposition they push may sound nice on paper, but take a look at your notes panel. If you actually listen to their case, there's a clear realization that they jump the fundamental analysis as to how the benefits they champion are and how this was exclusive to their side are able to actually manifest by going straight forward towards the abstract benefits that exist in a vacuum. The debate should have never boiled down to who could actually give out the most benefits and the most arbitrary examples. They actually had to prove why this was actually feasible in the large cases and why this was accessible at large. Our side told you that we wouldn't subsidize these companies, but rather that partnerships are fine because the motion actually never called for us to take off all of these partnerships insofar as we do not subsidize them. By factually, this is just two different things. Their only response to our entire harm about how socioeconomic inequality is exacerbated was by using private-public partnerships. Therefore, this argument still stands at the end of the day. Therefore, it's extremely easy to win over their case in this debate by 2 points. Firstly, why was it non-exclusive for all of your benefits? And secondly, why these benefits were actually able to be more accessible on our side of the house as a result. Their case never actually proves this. There's three main issues I want to tackle in this debate then. The first on accessibility of innovation, and I'll separate this into two different points. The first is how my whip has already told you that these benefits cannot just exist in abstract, that innovation simply cannot exist in abstract. There are examples of having rocket shoes and habitats on the moon and traveling to Mars were inherently things that were never going to be beneficial. Insofar as this motion calls for public funding, I do not know how the single individual, a normal average taxpayer individual, probably someone that is in this debate room right now, is able to benefit from rocket shoes and being able to live on Mars as a result. That was the entirety of their case. They failed to mechanize how they would get actual tangible benefits that would benefit your everyday individuals. Rather, we think NASA had better accountability mechanisms. For example, what my first speaker has already told you. Secondly, on the comparative then, we told you a few things. The democratic pressure was more likely to be applied towards NASA, to government institutions, because of political capital, like how you're able to vote out governments. Therefore, governments had the incentive to listen to the people on the ground. But therefore, profit incentives don't actually work on our side, on their side of the house. This was simple, and we've already told you in second proposition. Sure, you can have regulations, but these are rich companies with large lobbying power. The rich aren't going to care about wanting to take down these individuals because at the end, they directly benefit from these private companies. There's no incentive for regulations to be therefore put at such a large term. They can maybe cite an example, but we don't actually know how feasible this was actually carried out. But the second point then is in terms of market competition, which at the end of the day, they pigeonhole their case into. That second opposition says that they team up to research and develop on things. We think that we can still partner with companies. But notice how this assumes that rich companies and their board of directors that sit at the top of piles and piles of cash actually care about people on the ground. If they really want to win this debate on expanding job markets, then it was simple. Why would these jobs actually be beneficial to everyday individuals? Why was NASA going to hire someone from your local university graduate? Why was NASA, or why was SpaceX and these private companies actually going to involve more people, more average citizens, rather than the rich already sitting at top of piles and piles of cash already? Therefore, it was clear in this debate on a few things that they positioned their case into. Number one, that they're able to get innovation. We told you that likely this is symmetrical, that NASA is actually going to get better innovations on our side of the house, as they were more accountable, and accountability mechanisms via profit incentives never actually worked for things that only benefited the rich on their side of the house. They needed to not just assert that they will help people on the ground, but rather why SpaceX and Blue Origin are actually able to help these people. But none of your examples and benefits actually help people on the ground then, so it was clear that our side won on this clash. Our case has been woefully under-engaged with by simply just counter-asserting examples and benefits. Therefore, it's clear that the ballot should go to proposition in this debate.
All right, thank you very much to Proper Pride for that very fine speech as well. And thank you all for the debate. So I'm just going to take 1, maybe 2 minutes to fill in the ballot, and then I'm going to come right back for rebuttals, for feedback. So please do not leave this call. Just stay here, just hang around. This will be short.